How do you get out of being the bottleneck? You have to build a management team, and you give them clear scoreboards.
You're not just climbing trees, you're climbing destiny. Yeah.
What is going on? And welcome back to the Branching Out Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Rademacher. And on this podcast, we talk about how to grow your business, specifically your tree business. And today on this episode, I want to talk about something that every tree care owner is going to face if they're serious about growing. And this is not just tree care specific. This is any business owner. If you're serious about growing your business, at some point you are going to face challenges with scale. And when I say scale, it's not just about buying another truck or throwing more money at ads. Scaling breaks down because of leadership, systems, and seasonality. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Now, the first thing that I really want to touch on is the fact that your business is never going to outgrow your leadership. That's something that I learned straight from Jocko Willink's Extreme Ownership book. Basically, if marketing is too expensive, if the crews aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, if the jobs are sloppy, if they're not profitable, at the end of the day, it all rolls uphill and it's all on leadership. The thing that I see oftentimes, and the mistake that personally I've made, and don't get me wrong, like I come on these podcasts, I don't have all the answers. A lot of this stuff is from hard-won experience, right? The thing is that a lot of times as business owners, we have a lot of pride in our decision-making skills and our decision-making abilities. And so the owner of the business becomes the sole decision maker, the only person that's capable of making decisions. And that feels good for a while because you are in control. It's your business. It's your baby. But it does become the ultimate bottleneck. You cannot scale if you're the only brain that is making decisions, or more importantly, and probably more commonly, the only brain that's allowed to make decisions. So you have to find that balance of making sure that you're responsible for the quality, but then also that you have good team members in place. If your business only runs because you're there explaining things every morning, then that's not a business, that's a job. You have created yourself a job. Tribal knowledge doesn't scale. And that just means that just because you've done it this way time and time again, it's not, somebody can't just walk into your business and pick up and do the things that they need to do to make it grow. And that's what the definition of scaling challenges are, right? If you wanted to know what does scale properly, we found out is processes, SOPs. You'll often hear people say that stands for standard operating procedures. Basically, what do we do to accommodate or solve this problem? Or what do we do in this scenario? Or how do we operate when these conditions are present? So from your SOPs, you're able to create trainings, which are basically just building out systems for how you operate. And instead of telling your foreman how to set up every single day, you've got it documented, trained, and repeatable, and they know what to do without you there. And that's what frees you up from the babysitting and the decision making and allows growth to occur. From there, you can just hold people accountable to make sure that they're following the SOPs. Now, this is a learning curve, and there's going to be some additional training that takes place. But once that's able to happen without your involvement, when anything in your business is able to happen without you being the one that's dictating or driving the show, that's when you're starting to move into what I consider to be business mindset, where you're creating the opportunity and the freedom, the whole reason that we all got into business in the first place, right? But that doesn't happen if I'm the only decision maker. Let's also not forget that tree care is seasonal, meaning you're going to get spikes when storms roll in. You're also going to get slowdowns in the fall and winter months. And the reality is that during those seasons, marketing gets more expensive, right? During slow season, because everyone is fighting for fewer leads. Now, so you have to plan ahead. You have to be ready for slow season. Your strategy needs to shift a little bit. This is a great time to run review campaigns, reactivate past customers. Anybody that you've done work for in the past, you can send out text messages or phone calls to build brand awareness. And don't panic and pull back when the costs rise, because that's when your competitors do. Consistency is what's going to win here. So when the wintertime rolls around, there are just less people raising their hand or going to Google and saying that they need tree work done. That's just facts in real life. So what happens is, just like any other auction, there's a supply element and a demand element. When the demand for that attention goes up, or the supply of that attention rather goes down, demand goes up, the cost goes up. You now have more competition when it comes to being shown in the in the auction for Google ads. The same thing for Meta, Facebook ads, or Nextdoor ads. Everywhere that you're running advertising, you are paying for attention. And when that attention is more scarce, the costs are going to rise. So be prepared for that. Don't panic when you used to get leads for $65 in the summer, but now all of a sudden you're spending $85, $100 per lead in the winter months. The reality is that as long as you understand your closing ratio and your customer acquisition cost, it is certainly still scalable in the winter months, and you can set a dial on your business and grow at the rate that you need to grow, regardless of the seasonality. So a lot of companies stop at sort of building out their, what I consider to be their ground level team, right? Like, which is their level one employees, and they don't ever really build out a management team. So, and the reason for that is because it's expensive, right? If I add on a salesperson, they are going to be generating revenue to cover their salary. If I add on a ground crew person, they are going to be cutting and generating revenue that offsets their salary. If I hire somebody to watch over the ground crew people, that's when it gets a little dicey, and that role pays a little bit more. So it's not an inexpensive position to fill. That said, the way that you get your best bang for your buck in those types of positions is to make sure that that individual is trusted with some decision-making power, because that's going to take a ton of burden off of your plate. And at the end of the day, the only things that are going to make it to your desk are going to be things that they couldn't solve by themselves. So how do you get out of being the bottleneck? You have to build a management team, and you give them clear scoreboards, right? You don't just bring somebody in and say, okay, this is your puppy now, you can deal with it however you want to. We are still business owners. We do still have some standards. We have our name that's on the building. We want to make sure that the quality is up to par with what we expect. That said, you can certainly set up a scorecard of the things that you want to happen. And then if those things do not happen to the way that you would expect them to, you have a singular person that you can hold accountable for that. That's where management really comes in handy, right? I had an old boss that used to say, you have one throat to choke, right? You have one person that's responsible for all of these issues that might arise on the job. So here's some roles that a tree care company can start to put in place. The first one I think would be like an operations manager. Probably not the very first hire that I would make, but this is the person that's going to run your scheduling, your routing, and make sure that your crews are efficient. So this is the individual likely that would be even answering the phone, doing dispatching, making sure that you have the people in place, and that is following up to make sure that the sales team is responding to the leads in a proper time frame and getting those estimates booked within 48 hours. If you're booking out estimate, I'll get to you next week, that's not going to cut it. Another option is a sales manager or a lead estimator. That's going to be the person that's going to set the pricing standards. They're going to track the close rates and owns everything on the revenue side. So everything from what was the number that we quoted this customer, that all falls onto the sales manager or the lead estimator. From there, you can also add in crew leaders or a foreman. There's basically the mini CEOs that are in the field. They're responsible for safety and customer satisfaction. So this is one of those positions that I say sooner rather than later, right? If you can get yourself out of the fulfillment, right? As business owners, I'll just speak for myself. One of the best things that we did was to work towards remove ourselves from the fulfillment of the product that we sell, which is marketing packages, right? So as soon as we were able to hire these key folks that were intelligent people that we had trusted to make decisions that would further benefit our clients' businesses and our business, the more time that I got to focus on things that are actually revenue generating activities for the business. And the same thing would happen for you. If you weren't chasing around your crews trying to fix, the fence that got broken, or the irrigation system that we cracked the pipe on. And if you didn't have to handle all of those little details, you would be able to take a step back and focus on the things that are actually going to be driving the ship forward. And I think about this analogy just sort of came to me, so bear with me. I'm gonna experiment here. But if you think about like a ship, right? Even back in the day, like an old pirate ship, the person that is steering the boat or directing it isn't down in the gallows or in under the deck doing the rowing, right? And if you're a business owner that is down there hands on with your crew and you're rowing the boat, you can't see where you're going and you can't direct the team on where to go. It's much more important as a visionary, as a CEO, as a leader, to be the one that's actually building the team, cultivating the team, and setting the trajectory of the business and where we're going, right? So that's why it's so important to have these people in these places so that they can take some of that burden off of you. You might even consider hiring like a customer success manager. And this is somebody that would follow up with the jobs that you've already done and make sure that happy customers turn into repeat customers and give us good reviews. You can also, once you're at scale, you can bring in a marketing coordinator that handles all the photos, reviews, lead tracking, and keeps the pipeline healthy. I like to think of this as like a CMO position. This might be somebody that handles all of your social media, your website, if they're a well-paid individual, but you can really hold them accountable towards lead flow. And if you're not using an agency like ours, or you're using an agency like ours and you want to get to the next level, it would be certainly to bring this in-house, right? If you're able to bring your marketing in-house and manage yourself, you have A, more time to devote to it, and B, you have probably better outcomes that way, if I'm just being candid, right? That said, this is going to be a very expensive position to fill. But if you're at that scale and you're at that level, it would be a worthwhile position to fill. I think the challenge that most business owners have is that they have a hard time figuring out what is a good operator or what a good marketing manager looks like, right? Like, what is that? I can't distinguish. Like, I personally can't tell the difference between a $1 million painting and a $100 painting. I'm not the guy. I don't have that. I don't have that vision, right? And I think the same thing is true for a lot of business owners when you start talking about marketing, is that it's this mystical, amorphous thing that is really hard to define, but everybody knows it is necessary. Um, the last thing I'll touch on, the last position that you might consider, would be a finance manager or an admin manager. This is the person that's going to protect cash flow with payroll. This is probably one of the last things that a business owner will offload, in my experience. And this is everything from invoicing, reporting, making sure that the crews are paid, making sure that your insurance is up to date. This person is handling like everything on the finance side. And then once you're big enough, if you're really trying to get the ultimate freedom, you can hire a general manager who ties it all together so that the owner can actually take a step back. I think what's important to consider is that at every stage of scale, business owners are wearing multiple hats, right? There's not a day that goes by in my agency that I'm not playing part CEO, a part COO, part CMO, lead sales guy, sometimes web strategist, director of client success, admin, finance. I'm doing all of the things. And the idea, and this came from, I really got this concept honed in from a book called Buy Back Your Time with Dan Martell, which the whole concept is one by one, I look at what is the most trivial task that I, as the co-founder, am doing in our business, and how can I take that off of my shoulders when the revenue supports it. And if I continue to make that day in and day out trade, right? Some of those things are honestly as simple as having my meals prepped, right? Like if I go and purchase pre-made meals, I can truly buy back time. I can literally go to, here locally, I live in Daytona, there's a company called Afterbody Meals. And I can go and for I think $11 or $12 a meal, I can buy a lunch that would save me, call it 15 minutes, 20, 30 minutes to make a decent lunch for $11. If I make more than $22 an hour, then that's a good trade. And so the buyback principle is actually 4X, right? But you can see where all of a sudden I'm starting to not trade my time for money, and instead I'm trading my money for time. And that principle will apply to every single one of those roles that I just mentioned that I'm currently doing. At different places in our business, I was also the web designer, right? I was also the person setting up the meta ad campaigns. I was also the admin person. But all of those positions we have been able to fill, or fulfill, I should say, for less money than it is worth for myself or my business partner. As we continue to scale, a lot of those other hats will come off of me, and I'll be able to put those positions in place with high skill individuals that I trust to make some of those decisions. So that's, each one of these roles, they remove a piece of decision making from the owner. And that's how you go from A, being the bottleneck, to actually building a machine. But then B, it's also how you get to live what the whole reason of why we got into business in the first place, right? Because Instagram told me that I was going to have a lot more free time, and I was going to have all this, I was going to have this magical life where I would be sitting on yachts. I think, I'm not there yet, but I think that the key to that is through the buyback principles. Dan Martell talks a lot about this. If you're still doing $10 an hour tasks, you're never going to scale. You need to free yourself up and focus on the $1,000 an hour tasks. And those are vision, strategy, big relationships, and sales. Delegation is not an expense, it's leverage. And that was a quote. You've probably heard of, if you listen to this podcast, you'll probably know that I'm a huge Alex Hormozy guy. And you've probably heard him say it, but scaling is just math. If your offer sucks, if your margins aren't good, if your CAC and LTV, CAC is your customer acquisition cost, and your LTV is your lifetime value, how much in profit do I expect to receive from a customer over the lifetime of them being a customer of mine? If those numbers, if that ratio doesn't make sense, then more marketing is not going to save you. More ad spend on Google is not going to save you. More walkers going and knocking doors is not going to save you. Your CAC and LTV need to be at a healthy ratio, at least 4-to-1, if you want to scale this thing. And that's why focus and discipline are super important. We have a tendency, Hormozy always talks about the woman in the red dress syndrome, which is, from the Matrix. There's that scene where Neo is walking, and Morpheus is explaining that, basically everybody that he sees is an enemy, and you can't trust anything, and keep your head on a swivel. And all of a sudden, this woman in a red dress comes through, and Neo's like just locked in on it, and then turns back around, and Morpheus is, guy's got the gun to his head. Focus is like the antithesis. I don't even know if that's the right word. Antithesis of, a CEO. Is we tend to, in my experience, be the most ADHD individuals, right? Like, we go off on these tangents, we see endless possibilities, and it's really difficult to not chase shiny objects. But if you nail the fundamentals, your SEO, your Google ads, reviews, systems, and training, you do the boring stuff consistently, and you can watch just how far you'll take it, right? Getting reviews isn't sexy, but if you do it on a regular basis and you bake it into your processes, you'll find that the reviews will actually make or break your business. So, to wrap this thing up, if you're trying to scale your tree care business, remember this: scaling breaks when leadership fails. If your processes aren't documented, and if you as the owner are refusing to let go, you're setting yourself up for failure. The fix is leadership growth, and that means constantly learning new things. All my CEO friends, all my business owner friends, I read every single day. I'm constantly listening to podcasts and taking in new information. It's something that we have to do because the business is only going to grow as large as the founder. Period. Full stop. It doesn't matter how many crews you have. If you're not getting better, the business will not get better. So make sure that you're focusing on growth, SOPs, and empowered decision makers. You're leveraging smart marketing through seasonality, and you have to relentlessly focus on the fundamentals. Scaling is not about adding more saws or more trucks or more ad spend. It's about building a machine that runs without you. And that's how you go from operator to true owner. Appreciate you guys for sticking with me today. If you have any questions, I'm always down to chat, so feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we'll catch you on the next episode.